My name is Sarah Ferencz, and I'm the archivist at the Whitby Public Library.
Join me on this walking tour of downtown Whitby.
We begin this story by acknowledging that it takes place on the traditional treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island, First Nation of the Mississauga Nation. May we respectfully share in the responsibility of the stewardship and environmental protection of these ancestral lands. We recognise that we still have a lot to learn about the people who lived on this land for thousands of years before the first settlers arrived. This land was first surveyed by Augustus Jones in 1791 in order to accommodate incoming United Empire Loyalists from the American Revolution.
That survey and a later one in 1795 laid out the areas of what would become the three communities of Whitby. In 1802, John Scadding was awarded 1,000 acres of land at Whitby Harbour. Settlement of that area began in 1819 when he named the area Windsor after a small piece of land he owned in Devonshire.
The harbour at Windsor was considered the second best natural harbour on the north shore of Lake Ontario after Toronto. This attracted savvy business people and developers who invested in the harbour's infrastructure.
The development at the harbour prompted the growth of other communities in Whitby, including Perry's Corners and Hamer's Corners.
Immigrants from the UK and Western Europe were attracted by the area's commercial and mercantile opportunities. The population grew from 500 in 1844 to 3,500 in 1850.
However, it was around this time that the citizens of Windsor were starting to realize that their mail was being confused with the other Windsor of southwestern Ontario.
Because of this, a public meeting was held here at Scriptures Inn on July 10th, 1847, to change the name of Windsor to Whitby.
Whitby's first library was officially formed in 1852. It was known as the Mechanics' Institute. The goal was to educate and instruct the businessmen of the community.
It was located on the corner of Mary and Byron Streets. On November 27, 1873, the building and all its books, 1,300 to 1,400 volumes, were destroyed by fire.
The Mechanics' Institute re-established itself, and by the 1880s, it allowed children and women into its space. It was also during this time when the Mechanics' Institute opened its doors for lectures and community space. In response to this growing demand for space, in 1911, the town of Whitby started investigating avenues to create a public library.
The town of Whitby successfully applied for a Carnegie grant to build a public library. The grant, in the amount of $10,000, was provided by the American industrialist Andrew Carnegie.
The cornerstone was laid using a silver trowel that is on display at the Archives and Local History Gallery at the Central Library. It was laid in 1913, and underneath is a treasure trove of coins and local newspapers. The library was officially opened May 1st, 1914.
The new Whitby Public Library was designed in the Beaux Arts architectural style, with a grand exterior staircase leading up to a large main entrance. Large columns, a triangular centre gable, and large windows on either side of the entrance made for a very grand building.
Inside, the library housed separate reading rooms for men, women, and children, and a whopping 5,000 books. The Carnegie Library housed the Whitby Public Library's collections for 59 years, closing only once in 1917 due to a coal shortage, which affected fuel supplies for heating the building. The Carnegie Library is designated under the Ontario Heritage Act.
These 5 townhouses were built in 1857. The town was growing rapidly, and there was a need for live workspaces for professionals, including doctors, dentists, lawyers, and judges.
The 5 private residences were each 2 stories. They had the offices in the rear, and at the time cost £3,000 to build, which is about $600,000 Canadian now.
All 5 townhouses have been designated under the Ontario Heritage Act. Pearson Lanes has a unique story. In an effort to save the houses at 201 and 203 Byron Street North from demolition, a local businessman had them moved to this location. He connected them to the houses he already owned at this site and turned the buildings into a series of boutiques which opened in 1987.
201 and 203 Byron Street North are known as the Holiday and Harrison houses, respectively. Both of them were built in 1912 by local builder Thomas G. Deverell, using supplies from what was known as Perry's Castle. Perry's Castle was a large mansion located in what is now Kinsman Park. Pearson Lanes was extended further in 1989 when the buildings on Byron, south of Mary, were incorporated into the structure.
The Whitby Chronicle office was built in 1862. Published by William Henry Higgins, the Whitby Chronicle started in 1857.
The Chronicle became a well-respected newspaper in Ontario. It was known for many of its special features, including its town improvements column, which described in detail any new buildings in the community.
The arched windows were meant to allow as much light into the composing room as possible. The two windows on either side of the large window were originally doors.
Sometime around 1900, the Whitby Chronicle left the Chronicle building and relocated to the southwest corner of Dundas and Byron Streets. In 1910, the Chronicle building was purchased by the Royal Hotel and converted for use as a movie theatre.
After a number of different publishers, Charles A. Goodfellow merged the Whitby Chronicle with the Whitby Gazette in 1912 and published the Gazette and Chronicle. This is the second Royal Hotel located on this site. The first was built in the 1850s and burnt down in 1872. The current Hotel Royal was built and opened in 1873.
It was designed by architect Henry Langley, who was responsible for building 11 other structures in Whitby, including All Saints Anglican Church. The Royal Hotel was known as the finest hotel between Kingston and Toronto. The dining room could seat up to 180 people, the ceilings were 12 feet tall, and there were 28 rooms, all elegantly furnished by local craftspeople.
This building was originally constructed as the Ontario Bank in 1867.
According to the town improvements column in the Whitby Chronicle, the bank had substantial oak counters about 26 feet in length, a brick and iron vault, a wide convenient desk, and shutters on the first floor windows which could be raised and lowered with a crank.
The bank was located here until 1890, after which point the building became occupied by Edmund Stevenson's Ticket and Telegraph Office.
Stevenson died in 1920, and the building was separated into apartments. Along with the installation of the bathrooms, small windows were added to the north side of the building.
Peter Perry was born in Bath, Ontario, on November 4, 1792. He purchased land in Whitby prior to moving here with his wife and children in 1836.
He established a grain store at this intersection, which happened to be the intersection of the Centre Road running from the harbour all the way up to Brooklyn, and the Kingston Road, which ran from Toronto or York to Kingston. Because of Perry's influence, a community grew up in this area known as Perry's Corners.
Across the street, you'll see the first branch of the Toronto Dominion Bank that was built outside of Toronto. This building was constructed in 1874 and used by TD until 1970.
The southwest corner was the location of the Whitby Post Office, built between 1908 and 1910. The clock was installed in 1911 after being shipped from England.
On the northwest corner sits a building that was constructed in 1873. It was in use as a drugstore for 96 years. Notice the date stone over the third floor window at the corner. It says Jerry, 1873. Originally built of red brick, it was stuccoed over in 1939.
On October 16, 1877, fire destroyed almost all the buildings on this side of Brock Street between Dundas and Colborne. The only exception was the TD Bank. The fire was caused by a delivery man tripping and dropping his tray of lit oil lamps. The fire broke out at the back door of Thomas Lawler's grocery store at 103 Brock Street South. The lamps immediately burst into flame and the whole store was engulfed.
Witnesses say it took 12 minutes for the Whitby Fire Department to reach the site with the new engine, known as the Merriweather, on display at the Centennial Building.
There was no hope of saving Lawler's store, so the fire department focused on the TD Bank to the north. However, the winds carried the flames to the south, and the fire overtook one frame building after the other. In an attempt to get ahead of the fire, citizens began tearing down the buildings to the south. hoping to stop the fire in its tracks. Eventually, the Oshawa Fire Brigade arrived, but shortly thereafter, the water source for the two pumpers dried up, and the firefighters had to move to wells further away from the fire, and this took up valuable time. Luckily, the brick building that was originally located here stopped the fire from proceeding any further. However, the building was gutted and demolished. In the end, all buildings south of the TD Bank were replaced. New buildings were erected between 1878 and 1883.
This building was the last to be constructed following the Great Fire. It was built in 1883 for D.C. Downey, a coal and feed merchant.
For 80 years, the store served the community. In 1962, it became Bowman and Gibson Insurance.
On the south wall of the building is a metal hitching ring to which customers could tie their horses. It is the only surviving hitching ring in the downtown.
However, recently, Brock Street Brewery incorporated hitching rings into the design of their new building as a nod to the original hitching ring. Thanks for coming along on the virtual walking tour of downtown Whitby.
To learn more about this project, visit whitby.ca/Doors Open. Visit doorsopenontario.on.ca, where you will find more to discover from Whitby and beyond.